Welcome back to a new extra episode of En Busca de Porko. This is David speaking. This is an extremely short episode because we really had no time to record episode 8, so there were barely any fragments that we had to cut for time. But we have 9 that I'm going to play in a minute, which are called GAIA, My Little Humanity, Operation, Nova Alea, Colonia, Atmosfear Spanish Dub, Monopoly, Space Alert, and Alliteration. So that's it. I'll leave you with the fragments.
Fragment 1. GAIA.
I don't know if we want to say anything more about GAIA and Game On.
It hasn't started yet, so
Okay.
maybe by the end of the weekend, the whole scene will be just like it will be us fighting each other.
Absolutely.
Already last night in trying to split the check for like very fancy steaks, we already had like a very tense moment. So I don't know.
I mean, I'm free because I'm not part of Gaia, so I think I can be neutral.
Yeah, so we still don't know exactly, but yeah, there is a podcast related to that in which Jim Monroe, who is the main organizer of the network, has been interviewing people on issues of succession, for example, like what happens when you don't have time. For example, like you have Matangwe goes like 5 years from now, you're like you have a job, you have children or whatever, you need to find somebody who can keep doing this project, and so that kind of like issues, for example. And obviously founding and more like kind of boring things. So we'll see.
Fragment 2. My Little Humanity.
And then Tadeo Franzani tried to make a simulation game called My Little Humanity. Tadeo was our fourth member who was here last time.
Mm-hmm.
Called My Little Humanity, about society living in a boat, about all of humanity living in a boat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It didn't work out for
For
that society, no.
Ambitious.
Yeah.
Fragment 3. Operation.
Kind of
And I imagine the ball is fluorescent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Things like that. So that's an example, kind of like a maybe more ambitious example. But another one would be like I made like a version with my partner, version of the Operation game, the one, but except is based is like as if it was a Victorian era Operation game. So like at the beginning of the electricity, and it's about the illnesses of women as seen from the very kind of like backward or like very early medicine. In the Victorian era.
So like hysteria.
Exactly, yeah.
I was just talking to another curator last night about an operation game that was Brexit based, about getting the UK out of the European Union.
Right. So something like that, and that we kind of like basically made put together for an exhibition.
Fragment 4. Nova Alea.
And this isn't the first game in your Invisible Cities series.
Yeah, the previous one was Nova Alea, that was about gentrification, and it was also like very simple, kind of like abstract with an attached narrative. So you're playing this relatively formal game, and then you have a story that is triggered by like story bits that are triggered by the states or what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I remember that one. The system emulated housing bubbles and real estate bubbles, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it was a relatively simple system in which you're trying to buy buildings when they are cheap and sell them when they are tall, meaning that when they are like expensive,
right.
But before the bubble bursts in that particular building.
Fragment 5. Colonia.
Why did you go to Colonia? Where did that come from? This is just personal curiosity.
Being like frantic tourists. That's what we are. Like just like, yeah.
Because people go to Colonia, and I like. What did you think of Colonia? I guess is the question. How did you find?
I thought it was alright.
That's kind of how I feel, and it's like
it was probably not worth like an hour, like both ways and so on. It was alright. It was touristy, but yeah. Sure. The best thing about Colonia was the stray dogs that are sort of following you around, and they are like beautiful. And I found a dog that looks like my dog, so that was pretty nice. That's kind of like saved Colonia for me.
The thing I can imagine that would be nice about Colonia is that there's so little to do that you'll chat with one another and you'll like catch up.
That's kind of like what we did, but also we are going to have a lot of time to catch up. So
Midnight steaks were good.
Yes, those were here in Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
Fragment 6. Atmosfear Spanish Dub.
The one I played was dubbed in Spanish, very European Spanish.
Oh, dub, so same actor, but like with that.
I think, yeah, I doubt anyone would just re-record the face. Yeah, it's easy.
Yes, yeah, that's the... Oh, that's so funny.
Yes, that's the very European Spanish accent.
Overdub. Yeah, the original one has like I think a British accent. It's like a very which is kind of like a signifier for Middle Ages sometimes. So it's like fantasy-ish.
Same with the Spanish accent here.
Yeah.
So it works the same way.
Fragment 7. Monopoly.
Yeah.
Who made the Landlord game? We'll have it on the notes.
Yes, yeah.
It's Elizabeth Maggie, the author.
Elizabeth Maggie, yeah.
Maggie. I have no idea.
Yeah, she was an activist, like way back, like in the 19th century. She was, if I remember correctly, like the story has been told many times, so I'm not
but
gonna
never here.
Give it justice. Oh, I'm sure people heard of that a little. Well, if not, you should probably.
I mean, I wrote about it in my article about Paolo's work, but never on the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's the best story about games, board games ever, because it starts from like a woman activist that is basically like making a game whose mechanics are actually warning about the danger of monopoly. Mm-hmm. It becomes rather successful, but in the indie kind of way. Mm. She tries to pitch it to, I think, was Parker Brothers at the time, to the major sort of like producer of early board games, and they're like, no, this is a little bit too complicated, a little brainy. And a few years later, basically, Parker Brothers like redesigns it, and pretty much in the way it is now, but maintains essentially the same kind of setup mechanics, but sort of like flips the meaning.
Sure.
And so like being a monopolist, being a capitalist is basically good. The original version was meant to actually promote a kind of like a type of taxation on land, essentially.
Yeah.
And so it was like
there were two rule sets.
Yes, and the interesting thing is that there were two rule sets. So you could play as sort of like monopolist, so the way we know, and then you could play as the world like with the particular policy in place that would prevent the kind of accumulation of. So maybe the other version that was ideal was less interesting as a game because there was less conflict or less imbalances. But yeah, so she gets ripped off basically by this company that now owns monopoly, and maybe they probably also like got after the estancieros. I don't know, but, because they are very protective of their brand. There have been like multiple people who have tried to create a version of Monopoly that were more faithful to the original idea, and they got like into lawsuit because of that. So yeah, I like the idea that of you could potentially do it right now. That you could create like VHS or like DVD or like even YouTube videos for that are meant to complement games that are already existing, and it wouldn't really be an infringement of any sort. It's like almost like playing a movie with like a commentary soundtrack or like a different soundtrack or something like that.
I think maybe after this podcast we need to record a little segment about the history of El Estanciero, because I think that'd be actually pretty interesting. I don't know what the history of it is.
I mean, maybe it has the potential to be really, really boring.
No, if it's boring, we won't record it. But if there's anything interesting to add, I think that could be. Well, I know that it's still being published, so I don't think if Parker Brothers tried to sue them, it either didn't work, or they bought it, or they bought the rights. One of the two.
Because it might have been the hexagon. Because the funny thing about patenting games is that you cannot really patent a gameplay, but you can patent various things. Like the board, for example, is it's in the original patent of Monopoly, right? So if you're something that improves it by making it like different, that might have a better case.
Fragment 8. Space Alert.
The only board game I'm sure there's more, but the only one I know that kind of plays on that is Vlada Chvátil's Space Alert, which you play with a CD, and depending on the track that you get, it randomizes different alarms that you're supposed to react to within the game.
Oh, okay.
And there's different tracks for different difficulties and different challenges.
Yeah, I started playing that. Yeah, it is like a bit of a timer, a bit of like, things that will be, especially, isn't that cooperative,
It's
right?
cooperative, but everybody acts at the same time, so it's really hard to coordinate.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense, because cooperative, you want to create a kind of like a time pressure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people are just like kind of like talking too much, and there's always like one player that dominates and micromanages the other one, and so it becomes a solitaire that the best player sort of plays with other people, kind of like being like, okay. So that usually like adding a time. I'm gonna wait for this.
Okay, sirens.
That's a space alert going on right there.
Yeah. So yeah, let's start this. I don't know how prominent it is.
I don't think it's particularly prominent.
Yeah.
It's just prominent for us.
But if you want to do some edits, it's not the ideal.
Yeah, I try to keep silent during my recording podcast with my mom. I have one podcast with my mom about song lyrics, and then when I'm editing, I never hear the siren in the background, or it's super not invasive, super in the background. So,
yeah.
Oh,
how do we wrap it up?
Fragment 9. Alliteration.
So wait, are you Professor Paolo Pedercini?
I'm
Is that adding another
Professor.
P to the...
That's true. Yeah.
Oh. I think you need... do you have a doctorate? Because then you could break out of the alliteration with a Dr. Paolo Pedercini.
I will never be a doctor.
Okay, all right. So it is Professor Paolo Pedercini.
Professor for life.
I think
I don't know. Hopefully.
we need another P there. Very polite Professor Paolo Pedercini.
Oh, I have a fake middle name, which is Pizza.
Pizza.
Yes. Everybody in the United States has a middle name that I don't know why, because they are all called John Smith, and so they need another name in the middle, right? And it's very like uncommon in Italy. If you have a middle name, it's because it's you're kind of like a noble of some sort.
Right.
You have like
or your first name
names.
is Maria.
Yeah, or something like like sometimes it might be functional in that sense, but I don't have a middle name, and so like everybody kind of like asks me like at the office like a driving license or something like that. They ask me, so what's your middle name? And I'm like, Pizza. So I'm Paolo Pizza Pedercini.
That's pretty good, really good one.
We have reached the end.
And that is it for today. I hope you all liked it, and bye bye.